What was the notion of space? How was it to teach in the time of social distance? Plans for the future? All the answers for these questions and more in today's second part of the talk with Rita McBride. Talk and discussions. In this part of the project, Sleeping for Tomorrow, we'll meet different people around the world, sharing with us their opinion, ideas, and thoughts about the changing of our time and their hope for the future. Thank you for joining us for the second part of the talk with Rita McBride, marking our first year of celebration of Sleeping for Tomorrow, the digital part. What was the notion of space during this social distances time? And what happened and evolved with your work because of this?
And virtually was really astounding, like how much could be conveyed with virtual interaction. And using another part of your brain, which is hard for me, like which is imagistic. Like I'm a real space person, so the space got very image like an image, but I didn't have in the end. I mean, once I got over that, I was really in there. Like I could install everything from looking at it in the picture. But I think that's because I had 33 years of doing it. I mean, I can, kind of understand what happens with things in space, but but I missed experiencing it. I think I also knew that about other artists when they were no longer around, the installations really changed a lot, especially with objects in space. You find a kind of limitation about that it is about a kind of finesse and being there. And then when you're not there, it's a different thing. I did really embrace the change in space of public space, because I think about public space. So when we had to distance ourselves, of course, I had a work that worked with modulars of distance. That was a grid that I had installed, was also from the late 90s, and I installed it in many, many places all around the world. But this time I installed the grid at a 1.5 meter space, and you interact with this grid. You go under it and come up through the center of it. So it's installed at chest height, and there's a lot of humorous moments that happen when people are in the grid, because you can't move in your normal way, but it's quite playful. It sounds a little strict, but actually it's a lot of fun. And so I was asked to install it in Holland, the Pont Museum in Tilburg. And then I said, great. And we went forward with it. And then we had to not open it to the public. And I thought, this is really crazy. And then I thought about activating it to try and learn something about how we can be, how we can be now. And so talking to dancers and asking Alexandra to then collaborate with me, with her dancers, helped us understand what's happening actually for us now. And we could see the relationships being very, very intimate, but very, very distant at the same time. And this was really expressed by the process that we did together. Everyone was, we didn't see anybody in real. So we were using local dancers. Alexandra's usual dancers couldn't get there and because of COVID. And so there was a school, an incredible dance school there that had great kids. And they would come every day, and they were in a bubble. So they would interact with each other in the grid called National Chain. And we would get a feedback loop. They had cameras on them. They had their own cameras. There was cameras set up everywhere. And I don't know, I think mainly it was just so inspiring. Very different movements than like a normal kind of, or some kind of assumed staging of dance movements or choreography. These were really kind of like street moves, or there wasn't a lot of ballerina like movements. It was much more raw and less about a vocabulary of dance, but really humans moving and being together. And they wanted to move so much. They were so happy to be moving, in the space together. It was very inspiring, everyone. And the film, the person working with the film, the material was it was just like, we were just in heaven. It was like, wow, this is so beautiful and amazing and powerful, what's happening with the movement in the museum. Looking back is always really great for artists. I mean, you can get on a train and you sort of forget where you are and where you want to go, even though you might not know that anyway. Being lost is a big part of being an artist, I think. But I really enjoyed the pause that happened and sort of assessing what gives me pleasure, what I think is important, what I learned from, so that it's not just mechanical to get up and go like, I should go to the foundry right now. You know, like that became kind of like, I wasn't reflecting on that activity so much. So I appreciate the time to reflect on it. And also just the kind of like, I sort of relationship with the territory of things in the world changed as well. Like, I feel embarrassed that we have so many things. So why do I want to make another thing? Or like, what is it doing to the world to make a thing out of carbon fiber? Or like, just thinking more about the implications of having stuff around, you know, like I'm not a big collector of stuff. So I'm really happy that somebody wants to live with a work of mine, or a city will engage with a work of mine, but it's not like, I still think like the kind of consumption of things and they become territorial more now. And so that's something I've also has led me to be more interested in perhaps moving images and a lot of laser works, which I had started about 6 years ago. So these are, easy. The transportation is simple for them, and the effects are really interesting, and they define space quite interestingly. So using light and as opposed to material. So it's really like working with things that are not gravity oriented. So I really feel freedom from not having to consider gravity all the time. Basically the same ones, but they take different dimensions and different orientations in different installations. And actually each time that I install these lasers, unlike Arena, which kind of also changes every time it gets installed, it's this really has huge differences, and things start to inform the next installation. So the first one was in Liverpool, the Liverpool Biennial, and I had lots of reasons for using a laser, mainly because I thought that Liverpool was, they give a lot of concerts because it's the Beatles, and so I thought, okay, they have like this tradition of lights, like happening in public space. So what I proposed, like beaming these green lasers up into space, like vertically, but that became illegal because you could kill an alien, or a few airplanes would come down. I don't know. They were like, no, you can't. I said, oh, so it has to be horizontal. So this was the beginning of like understanding that these things are also like have this kind of charge of destruction. They're considered even weapons in some states. And like, so in New York City, they had to be handled only by someone who had a permit to use them. Anyway, this one, so the first one, it was like, we had to find a place that was dark and that could take this horizontal kind of relationship with the lasers. And we used an old cistern, so it was full of water. And I really loved what happened when the water dripped from the ceiling and hit the laser light and like burst, because it would bond with particles and then be pretty fascinating. You could look at the universe kind of through it. And then but my idea was that Liverpool was such such a hard history there, and so sad in so many ways. Like, I wanted this to be like a portal to. It's also a big science fiction. They have one of the biggest archives of science fiction in Liverpool. Anyway, and there was supposedly time traveling happening in Liverpool. So this was meant to be a portal for like escaping this horrible history in this place, and kind of, and then it came to New York, and I brought with it this water idea, this element of water, and installed it there on purpose. So it had like a life where it just arrived into this building, and I had to rethink what barriers are. And this was also part of a interesting aspect that I had to do originally. So we made carbon really beautiful, like people movement barriers, but I call them guidance systems instead of barriers. And I install them so that they build little cul-de-sacs for looking. So it's not like, don't go across this line. It's like, go this way. This is the path, and stop here and stop there. That was something that I then worked a lot on during Corona, just to progress the idea of what these guidance systems can be and what they're needed for. I think I'm going to start using some red lasers. I've been playing around with them. It's great because I'm discovering geometry in another way with lasers. So this one I'm talking about is always a hyperbolic paraboloid, which is like Mae West, which is just an amazingly flexible and structurally stable form or geometry. And that's also really great because it expands and contracts to each situation. I think that the impulse to produce in 3 dimensions is much less, a lot more expression through drawing and CAD drawings and also pencil drawings. My process of going and working in a foundry or going and working in I couldn't do that. So I just kind of I realized I don't need to do that either all the time. It changed the actual end result, I guess. I guess there's not such a strong need to produce actually. I have embraced the idea that it can exist virtually. And how do we, have it exist virtually in a powerful way? I think it's super interesting to not feel like I have to deal with gravity all the time. So that was liberating, like sculpture, you have to deal with gravity all the time. And then in a virtual world, there's a lot of freedom there that I'm really interested in continuing to explore. Absolutely.
As we mentioned in the first part, you're a professor in the Kunstakademie Düsseldorf, Germany. And I would like to ask you, how was it to teach in the time of social distance when you were in the USA and your students in Germany, and what was evolving from this moment?
Teaching was another deal that was really, really difficult. I mean, the students were so brave to still want to make art and still, work on things. And I mean, I think they weren't as afraid as we were in the US. Like, it didn't really come to Germany in the same huge wave it came to LA. Anyway, there was a different reality also for young people, and me being of an age that was more jeopardy. And I did get COVID, and it was really hard for me to get back from it. And I'm very healthy. So I was, a little bit, I came from a different reality. And I was really nervous about not being able to keep the class kind of together, because it was really important that artists are together. I believe that. And I don't think we're solitary individual, geniuses. That's not my belief. I think we live in a collective world, and all the same resources are there for us to work with. And I don't mean money resources, but I mean the richness of life is there for everyone, and experience it together and then in different ways, and to express that together and exchange it together. And so I asked them to work on a project together, which is always very unpopular. Some of you know that I'd love that artists work with each other. I find it enjoyable to work with other artists. So I want to share that joy and also give some skills for that, because it is part of your life. And I keep telling them, you're not going to make it by yourself. It just doesn't happen that way. So, come on, you don't have to love each other, but you're all here together. So let's figure it out. And what we made was called Languished. And we talked a lot about what kind of work is viable in a digital world. So if we can't go to a gallery, what is showing up on the internet that looks interesting, and we kind of determined that it was moving images that had some power, and not necessarily feature films, but static images were not doing it. And photographs of work was not happening for anyone, and music was pretty great, but we still wanted to have a visual. So we had these kind of really interesting discussions, like Instagram is going to be our new gallery. How do we do this? Like, how do we use Instagram to to even as part of our process, not just to announce that we did this piece. And so it was a moving image that was very high quality and beautiful idea presented to us from one of the students in the class, Ding Ding, who had been making a lot of videos. So this was really easy for her to jump into. And she thought of, along with another collaborator, of not a student actually, but a production person and rendering person. They came up with this idea of a conveyor belt, like where your luggage comes out. They go around and around, you're waiting for your luggage. And that was the situation we were in. And then there was a guest student at the academy in my class called Brian Briggs, who was working a lot with AI. And he invited me to write a story for an exhibition he had in Essen at the Folkwang. So I started to use the AI in writing and got really, really seduced by the whole process of kind of teaching the AI what, feeding it vocabulary so that it can go one way or another, and then also being totally surprised by the kind of randomness and prompted by it, like kind of, okay, then this was, so I was kind of proud of one story, which was based on a surf movie, Endless Summer. So that these guys go all around the world, for trying to find the perfect wave. So I was trying, it was a Corona story actually, that where the epidemic, where the pandemic was in remission. You're just constantly moving to get out of the hotspots of the pandemic and trying to find, the beaches that were still open, kind of thing. And so it was a lot of fun. And then I also wrote with Glenn on that one and the AI. So collaborative writing, really started to happen during Corona.
What do you think is changing and you hope will change in the art?
No, there's a huge changing of the staff and also the identities of the institutions, how they're projecting, where they are looking to be in Arabic. They are changing. So obviously with Black Lives Matter, which happened actually, in 2020, it also has changed the cultural field, which is not part of the frustration of the process. But a lot of people did quit their jobs and never came back. And so there's a lot of rehiring with Black and brown people, which is fantastic. But it's a very different approach that's going on totally from the top to the bottom and all around. So it's not the kind of, it's definitely not what I grew up with and not what I have been assuming is part of how we work as artists or what we mean to culture, like what artists' role is in society. I think it's different in Europe, but in the US it radically shifted now, and there's a lot of reinterpreting or even just breaking, and that's it, like no more, just like big ruptures. I think it's all exciting. I'm definitely into change. I hope it's constructive change always, and it feels a little more like devastating now, but I hope that I've met so many new inspiring people that have a lot to give, and that's so I'm super optimistic about what's going to happen to us. And I think as artists, the market went way out of control, and that has been defining what we do way too much. I was out of balance. So that's something getting corrected or at least stratified. So a turbo market is still there, but it's for a certain kind of trading that goes on. And the rest of things are from off spaces to collectives, really great, inspiring activities by creative people. And I'm very much looking forward to a much healthier collective kind of joy that we could all have together and not territorial. So I think maybe a less money-based life as an artist, if we could have support, to live and not be so reliant on a market to survive and to make continue to produce, that would be great. And I hope some things like that happen. And I mean, obviously, it makes me really happy to think about a world where there are no people dying in flooding and dying in without there's much of that going on. There's so much still that really breaks my heart, and a lot of it is absolutely correctable, and with support from governments and taxpayers, people, and it's just not happening. So I mean, I can't believe there's a war in Ukraine. I can't believe it. And that kind of war where there are people, boots on the ground, or women's rights, or there's so many things that kind of went backwards now. And I guess that was a little bit of because of Corona and fear and insecurity and lack of civic, everyone kind of out for themselves. It's bad. I would rather love to see a more connected world.
Can you share with us any plans for the future with your works?
In the Hammer Museum in March 2023 is going to have a different orientation than any other one. You will see green lasers, see them from the street all day and all night. We're putting films on the windows to take a big degree of sunlight out, but it's they're really strong, and people assume that I'm using water actually for them to show them off like a smoke machine, like they do in concerts, but you don't really need them. That's like, I'm using it. The piece is called Particulates, so it's about looking at these particulates and seeing them spark at certain points. And this is now exciting for me because I'm the Beacon, the institution in New York City, but they have a space 2 hours north of New York City, and it's called Beacon. It's an old factory. It will be, they purchased it, they acquired Arena. So I was ready to sort of let it have a more institutional life, and also that I said, yes, we can show it there, and started drawing digital, like on my iPad or something. And then I started to draw like really kind of energy drawings of the space. So they are these kind of like understanding where the direction is in a room. I'm really into that, like what time, like how long it takes to walk through a room, and how the space is defined, like if there's a compression already to the space, and how I can direct that. And so like the Arena will be a pause place in a very long kind of corridor that I'm putting guide rails up and guidance systems, like building the vocabulary of guidance systems that help the experience somehow of choreographing how people move through space. The Beacon, that also I wanted to open source the designs for it, so anyone can make it an Arena. And this is more theoretical also. It's not just that more little arenas that look like the Kevlar and wood sandwich one that I made, but like a set of circumstances or a set of conceptual ideas that constitute an arena. And that's what I'm working on right now. So I'm still trying to figure out what that is. Like, is it enough to just go out and buy like seating and then call it arena? Or what are the things that really activate the essence of arena? And then very excited about sharing that with everyone. And we're programming it for a whole year. And there's a lot of dancers involved. Alexandra Waierstall from Düsseldorf with her dancers are going to start the activation, and it's going to be really great for a whole year, and ending a little bit with collaboration of Discotheque Flaming Star.
Thank you, Rita, for sharing with us your point of view and ideas.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being with us on the second part of the talk with Rita McBride, marking our first year of celebration of Sleeping for Tomorrow, the digital part. Subscribe below or in the website www.sleepingfortomorrow, and for seeing and hearing more talks to get the latest notification of our talk and discussion.